Friends, last year your dollar lost a ton of value. Inflation rose by almost 7% in just 1 month toward the end of the year. And that means in 30 days, your dollar became 93 cents. Inflation is a silent killer. It is a hidden tax that is felt by everyone. And this administration, yes, the Resident's Day, is only making it worse. Inflation is not slowing down, it's escalating quickly. So gold provides a hedge against inflation and can protect your family's wealth. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust for investing in gold and silver, and they also do a lot of other investments like cryptocurrency. You need to diversify your portfolio. So you have to take this seriously, friends. Oil prices are rising. We've seen supply chain issues, and all of this is going to compound our inflation problems. You can trust Legacy Precious Metals because they give you unbiased counsel that is based off of your personal situation. So you can speak to an IRA expert at Legacy Precious Metals at 866-528-1903 or download the free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, or call them at 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Well, happy Monday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis and have a great show for you today on a couple of really important issues. Obviously, the Ukraine-Russia crisis is still going on, and I'm going to talk with Jake Bequette, who is a great candidate running for U.S. Senate from the state of Arkansas. Later on in the show, he's going to tell you all about his campaign, why I've endorsed him. Excellent candidate. As you know, and listeners to this show know, I love having candidates on who are America first. They are not the establishment picks, and they are running because they are American patriots who absolutely care about the future of this country. So that's going to be really important. But first, I want to bring your attention to a story that dropped today that is just completely insane. This is the next piece of how the Democrats are trying on purpose to punish every single lawyer who worked for President Trump and worked on election integrity. Yeah, that includes me. My face is on the piece from Raw Story. It was first in Axios, who, by the way, did contact me over the weekend and asked for a response to this. And I told them, hey, if you're not even going to share with me the public relations PR drop, then of course I'm not going to comment. But and that's how these like leftist publications work. They try to tell you, oh, hey, we have the story coming out. Can we get your comment on it? But they're not willing to share anything. Well, I read the story today, and the Raw Story headline is actually the most telling. This is what it says. Quote, threatening their livelihood. Democrats target pro-Trump attorneys for disbarment. Yes. So this goes on to say Democrat operatives are working behind the scenes to expose and disbar more than 100 attorneys who worked on Donald Trump's election-related lawsuits. The 65 Project, a dark money group with ties to Democrat Party donors and, yes, Hillary Clinton, plans to begin filing complaints this week and airing TV ads in battleground states to prevent other right-wing lawyers from working on future Republican attempts to overturn election losses. No one worked on overturning anything, but that's their phraseology. Reported Axios. Here is the quotation that is a dead giveaway that this is simply political opportunism, and this is the Democrats trying to simply go after their political opponents in the realm of the legal profession. This is insane. You will not believe this. Quote, I think the littler fish are probably more vulnerable to what we're doing, said the project's advisor, David Brock, you should know that name, a Hillary Clinton ally who founded Media Matters for America and Super PAC American Bridge 21st Century. Quote, you're threatening their livelihood and, they've got reputations in their local communities. So this goes on to talk about how over 100 pro-Trump lawyers, and I've just learned this also includes the attorneys general that filed and signed on to the Texas versus Pennsylvania lawsuit. You remember the one that challenged the electoral certifications in the United States Supreme Court? This dark money Democrat operation is targeting constitutionally appointed officers in states simply for filing lawsuits challenging election results. They are trying purposefully to criminalize representing either a constituency, if you're an attorney general, or, like in my case, a private client like the Trump 2020 campaign. They are on purpose trying to make it so difficult for lawyers like me to maintain our bar licenses that we are going to have to defend all of these politically motivated attacks that are funded by dark money. And they're going after all of these, little small town lawyers who signed on to help with this effort in good faith, because guess what? That's what lawyers do. Lawyers represent a client interest. And it's an adversarial system where even the worst people, the worst criminal conduct that could possibly be alleged. I mean, even the Boston Marathon terrorist bomber got represented by counsel. That is nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to election integrity challenges. Yet, you don't see the dark money of the Democrats going and saying, oh, the lawyers who represented such an actual terrorist like that, they need to be disbarred over their representation. No, the Democrats know this is an adversarial system. And lawyers, while I happen to absolutely believe in the cause and believe in election integrity, and all of you who have followed me throughout my entire tenure with President Trump and my representation know that I believe we have serious election integrity problems in this country, not only with the 2020 election, but also now continuing into 2022 and 2024. Well, they are trying to silence me. They are trying to do that by taking away my livelihood, by taking away my voice, and by trying to bleed me dry by saying we are going to make you defend these absurd, ridiculous, unfounded bar complaints so that you will think twice next time, Jenna. You will think twice next time, little person who doesn't have access to a national media stage like I do, and who may not have the resources to defend these very costly and expensive defenses of bar complaints just to maintain their licensure. This is how evil, how corrupt, and how absolutely just insane the Democrats have become. They are trying to completely tear down the profession of lawyering in America. I mean, this is like the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, when you have a system that is no longer interested in justice, but only interested in a political outcome, and when you try to take away the livelihood and the bar licensure that is required to practice law in a state from any lawyers who simply dared to represent a Republican candidate and dared to represent the challenges of what the Trump campaign was alleging, that you are saying now you are such a political opposition that you deserve to be censored and silenced and have your livelihood taken away. That is how dirty of a political game that these Democrat operatives are playing. And I will not bend. I will not stand down. I will not be intimidated. And I hope that every one of these 100+ lawyers that are targeted by these bar complaints will stand up and say, this is absurd. And I hope for the sake of the profession that the bar associations who review these complaints will have the courage and the honesty and the integrity to see through this absolute political sham, because it's totally a political agenda, and to say, no, this profession is far beyond politics. And now you may disagree with the politics and the client politics of these attorneys, but they absolutely have the professional licensure right to represent the interests of their clients, even if they are a politician or a candidate for political office, without being concerned that their license is going to be taken away on that basis. That is absolutely the depth of depravity of these insane political hacks. And they are not even shying away from it. They're not even being silent about it. This isn't even a covert mission that somehow, we're having to file open records requests or, go and send undercover journalists to figure out who these people are that are filing these complaints. No, they're going and giving exclusives to left-leaning outlets like Axios and giving quotations like David Brock did, saying our intent is to tear down the livelihood of these people and that it'll probably be successful against the little fish. Well, you know what? I don't know if David Brock thinks of me as a little fish or a big fish or whatever kind of fish he thinks. I don't care. I am going to stand firm, but I'm also going to stand firm on behalf of all of the other 100 plus lawyers that are going to be victims and targets of these absurd and baseless bar complaints. And so I'm pledging to you today, I've already contacted a few of my friends about this, and I'm going to start a legal defense fund for all of these lawyers who are now going to have to, at their own expense, have to endure not only the stress of a bar complaint. Because if you've ever been a lawyer and you have a bar complaint, it's not an easy thing. Lawyers all get them because you have disgruntled clients, you have whatever it is. But to have this type of political opposition targeting you, this should not be costly to any of these quote unquote little fish, right? So I'm going to ask all of my viewers over the next week or so, or even just the next day that it takes me to put this together in this platform. I want to give you an opportunity to help defend the lawyers who are willing to defend election integrity and who are willing to stand firm and say, yes, every single client in the United States of America, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, you deserve the best defense possible. You have a right to a counsel of your choice. And I want to give you an opportunity to make a huge difference by donating to an election integrity defense fund for these lawyers, because I know from personal experience it is very costly to defend these things. I've already been the target of several bar complaints that I've had to hire my own lawyer for to make sure to defend against, just these ridiculously absurd charges that literally just because I'm a Republican, well, former Republican, but conservative, I'm a conservative that actually advocated on behalf of my client that they don't like, whose name happens to be Donald Trump and the Trump campaign, that they are trying to get me disbarred. That's just the most absurd, obnoxious political opposition rhetoric that cannot be successful, because the legal profession will not withstand that type of political bias. And if a lawyer has to be so concerned that his political opponent is going to come and try to disbar him or her over a case, that of course that will have a chilling effect on the profession. So I hope that if election integrity and any of this means anything to my listeners, and I know that it does, that you will join me in helping to provide financial resources to these other lawyers who are going to have a really difficult time because they are being targeted specifically from people like David Brock, who is a Hillary Clinton aide and a ridiculous, radical, rabid leftist. So I'm going to put together this legal defense fund to help out everyone else who is going to be subject to these bar complaints. And I also am going to have, total transparency on anything on this that I can find when these bar complaints are filed, have lawyers on to talk about it. Ken Paxton, who is the Attorney General for Texas, is going to join me later this week to talk about his race and the timing of all of this. And I just hope that you will not only help financially for these people who it's a very difficult thing to defend these. It's very expensive. And they know that. That's why they're targeting this. They cannot prevail, but I also hope that you'll join me in praying for this country and for this nation that we will not have a bar licensure attorney regulation division that is so given to this type of political opposition that they will even remotely contemplate taking away the license and livelihood of any lawyer simply because of the political views of their client. So please continue to follow me on social media. I'll give you all of the updates. I'll give you all the updates here on this show as well. And stay tuned for Jake Bequette. We're going to talk more about so many important things, and you're really going to like this interview. He's a great, great candidate from the state of Arkansas for U.S. Senate. And I'm going to also get his views on, of course, Ukraine and Russia, but why it's so important to focus on domestic policy in all of this as well. So stay tuned. Right now, Mike Lindell is having an incredible deal, and he's calling it the sale of the year. So for a limited time, you'll receive 60% off the Giza Dream Sheets that come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll receive a set for as low as $39.99. I have these dream sheets. They're kind of awesome. I still love my slippers though, but you can use the promo code Jenna on all My Pillow product, not just the dream sheets, not just the My Pillow, not just the slippers, not just the robes, but even the towels, everything else. So for a limited time with any purchase, you will receive Mike's soft cover book for free when you use promo code Jenna. I've read his book. I told you, his testimony is so amazing, from crack addict to CEO. It's truly, absolutely a God story. And we all have stories of how God has intervened in our lives and has hopefully compelled us to accept his free gift of salvation and to start on a path of truth and to embrace the truth of who God is and how much he loves us. And, this book is amazing. Mike is amazing how much he's willing to stand firm, not just in the political sphere, but also with Christian truth, the Word of God. And you're going to love this book. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, use promo code Jenna. And along with this offer, you will also get deep discounts on all My Pillow products. So go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475. Use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. All right, friends. Well, fans of this show know that I have been highlighting and pushing all of the great campaigns across the country for American patriots that are stepping up and are saying, hey, we don't like what's going on in this country. And so wanting to take back our government by running for office, state and local, all the way up to federal, and really taking and harnessing the spirit of America first. And so I've highlighted a number of candidates that I've endorsed across the country, and I hope that you will join me in supporting everyone who is running for office that actually has a great view of what government should do and what government shouldn't do, which of course is to preserve and protect our God-given rights according to the U.S. Constitution and the spirit of what our founding documents and that mechanism for government, that system of government really provides. We are all so proud to be Americans because for the first time in world history, we actually had founders that understood that rights come from God, our creator, not our government, and the sole purpose of government is to preserve and protect those rights. So one of the other candidates that I have endorsed is joining me now. It's Jake Bequette, who is running for U.S. Senate from the great state of Arkansas. And Jake, you're running against a long-term senator who last time I checked only has a 10% strongly approval rating. That's really bad on the GOP side. I think you can do better than that.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Jen. You're exactly right. The people of Arkansas deserve bold, dynamic leadership. They want a conservative warrior representing them in the U.S. Senate, not someone who's an empty suit establishment rhino. We've had that for decades, not just from the incumbent, my opponent in this race, but from many in the establishment wing of the Republican Party. We've seen the wages of that. We've seen the consequences of that failed leadership, and it is time to have bold conservative warriors in D.C.
Yeah, so tell everyone who may not be familiar with your background and why you got into politics, because you're not a career politician, far from it.
I am not a career politician. I'm proud to say this is my first campaign. I'm proud to be an outsider. I don't come from a political background. I come from a sports background and a military background. I grew up in Arkansas, born and raised in Little Rock. My grandfather, dad, and uncle all played football at the University of Arkansas, so I'm the fourth in a row in my family, a third-generation Arkansas Razorback. I played football for the Hogs. In the Coach Petrino era, I was a two-time team captain. I was drafted in the third round by the New England Patriots. was a Super Bowl champion, a very small part of that amazing dynasty up there in New England. Learned so much from Coach Bill Belichick and just the all-time greats like Tom Brady and Vince Wilfork, Julian Edelman, and yes, Rob Gronkowski. But then I really felt the call, and the greatest honor of my life was to serve our country in uniform. After my NFL career ended, I enlisted in the U.S. Army. I volunteered and graduated from U.S. Army Ranger School. I was commissioned as an infantry officer, and I deployed to Iraq with the 101st Airborne Division. And what really, set my sights on this race to get into politics was when I came home from Iraq and saw what was happening in our country over the last 2 years. With the pandemic, with the riots, the looting and violence in our streets, the suppression of our economy, the small businesses, just really the radical left taking over every major American institution, not to mention the D.C. swamp. I knew we needed new leadership, and now is the time. I mean, people in Arkansas and conservatives and America First warriors all over this country, they're looking for leaders. They're not going to accept the same old status quo. We got to have people who can move the ball forward, move the needle, rally others to our cause, and be difference makers, be disruptors, not just empty suits.
Yeah, and I think that's really the tension point of what's going on in 2022 is seeing this dynamic between the old establishment guard of the GOP that is very protective over their turf, and we've seen that they are just the DNC light out here in the swamp in DC versus the America First Patriots that are choosing to engage in civil service and in civics in our government to make sure that we can actually be a citizen-led government and not have all of the disaster that's been in Washington. I mean, I look at people like Lindsey Graham, for example, who is tweeting just the most ridiculous things, who's warmongering, looking at even Rubio and looking at, the people like Lindsey Graham and the three others that didn't even bother in the U.S. Senate to show up and to vote to defund Biden's ridiculous unconstitutional vaccine mandates. And then you have these senators that are saying, oh, we need to step up and do something, but they can't even at bare minimum do the job that the American people elected them to do. And so I think so many people are tired of it. Jake, you and I had an opportunity to actually meet at CPAC last week, and I saw so many young people and students and people who are really engaged for the next generation to say we need to take back the spirit of 1776, the spirit of liberty and freedom, and this whole idea of being a citizen-led government instead of the establishment-owned swamp. And so that's really, I think, the tension point in 2022 is, are people going to go for the easy way out and go for the establishment GOP that has just led the country for the last 40, 60 years, or are they going to actually stand up and make a difference and enact change within the GOP party? So what does it look like to you there on the ground in Arkansas as far as the GOP?
Well, it's very exciting here in Arkansas because Arkansans we're totally awake and engaged and energized. We're seeing anecdotal evidence from elections back in the fall of last year, around the Virginia race and the New Jersey races nationally that kind of showed what environment we're in. We're seeing that in Arkansas as well. But I think you really hit the nail on the head, and that's why I think President Trump is a great harbinger. I call him the great clarifier in many ways because he really exposed the true nature of not only the rhinos in the D.C. swamp, the establishment wing of the GOP, but he exposed the media. He really saw everyone just kind of showed their true colors, when he was running for office and then as president of the United States. And so, fortunately, due to his leadership and his really changing the game, nationally in terms of national politics, he's really shed a light on Arkansas rhinos as well. And the people of Arkansas, this is a deep red state. We're not going to lose the Democrats statewide. We have, all members of all statewide office holders are Republicans. We have GOP supermajorities in both houses of our state legislature. All 6 members of our congressional delegation are Republicans. But still, we have a 150-year legacy of the Democrat Party in this state, and it's not changing fast enough. So the people of Arkansas want real leaders. They're not going to accept the same rhetoric they hear from the same, empty suit rhino types. That's not going to fly anymore. They're engaged, they're energized, and we could not be more excited for the Republican primary on May 24th.
Yeah, and that's encouraging because even in a deep red state like Arkansas, we've seen your previous governor, Asa Hutchinson, who was so incredibly disappointing. Reminds me a lot of Greg Abbott in Texas, where in Texas isn't as deep red as it used to be, but some of these Republican governors that even though they're in a deeply red state and they could have the opportunity to really be those, beacons of truth and of conservatism and mirror someone more like a Ron DeSantis type, they're just completely missing it. And they are completely just caving to, as you said, the empty suit. And so hopefully the people of Arkansas and people across the nation in these deep red states will not just be deep red in terms of the establishment, but truly what that actually means, which is genuine conservatism. And so people like you, Jake, I know that you're a sincere Christian, and I think that also makes a huge difference in terms of how people can trust that you will actually understand the mission of American government. So speak a little bit about that and just why that facet of being faith-based is also incredibly important to your campaign.
Well, first of all, I totally agree with your comments about real Republican leadership. It starts with leadership. I learned that in football. I learned that in the military. I was just with Governor DeSantis last week in Florida. And really, his leadership has demonstrated not only what's possible, for other governors and other Republicans across the country, but he's really also helped to expose a lot of these weak Republicans, nationwide in safer Republican states, because the old logic, he blew the old logic out of the water because, look, Florida was a 50-50 state. He won by a fraction of 1% in 2018. And so the kind of common, the logic would go that, hey, he has to be careful. It's a purple state. He really can't act, big and bold. But he totally did the opposite of what, the traditional, narrative would suggest. I mean, he's been leading on these issues. He's taken a 50-50 state and he's turned it into a 55, 58%, 45, 42%, Republican versus Democrat state. Just by his leadership, he's created a culture down there that is attracting Republicans from all over the country, and he's taken a purple state and turned it slightly red. So that really, we should have 20 other Republican governors just like Ron DeSantis. We should have other senators from these deep red states like Arkansas, where we have, Arkansas is an R+30 state. There's no reason why we shouldn't have a conservative warrior leading from the front in that seat, not just an establishment hack. But, to your point about faith, I mean, you hit the nail on the head about the founders of this country, the foundation of this country. Our Constitution, those rights are not just mere words on paper. They're given to us. They're endowed by our Creator. And our government is founded, its whole purpose is to secure those rights. Okay, we believe they're not given to us by man, they're not given to us by other governments, they're given to us by God. And, we need people who serve in our government who are willing to put everything on the line. I mean, when I read the Declaration, my favorite phrase in the Declaration is in the last paragraph, and it's, we, the undersigned, pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that really meant something to those men. That was a sacred pledge they gave. And even though they were victorious in the revolution, many of those men who signed that declaration, they gave their lives and they gave their fortunes in service of this cause. And we need leadership. We need that spirit of 1776 that you just mentioned. We need those types of leaders who are running for political office. I too am encouraged by seeing these the CPAC and Turning Point and these organizations. You're seeing young people who are on fire, not just in Arkansas but nationwide. We can't wait for other generations to solve our problems for us and lead. It starts with us. There's no more excuses. We have to, the signers of the Declaration, the signers of our Constitution, many of them were young men in their late 20s and 30s. It starts with us.
Yeah, so well said, Jake. And I couldn't agree more because, as you mentioned, the founders, when they penned those words, they had no idea the outcome of that declaration. They were literally putting their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the line to do what was right and to acknowledge the supreme judge of the universe. And, my favorite line, obviously, other than the worldview statement that is in the Declaration, is also the name for God God that the founders put into the Declaration. I like to call it the Great Complaint, because they were putting this out into the courtroom of the world stage and saying, we are now showing how England has so usurped all of our God-given freedoms that we have to exercise a right that is God-given and alter and abolish our system of government. And they appealed to the highest source of authority, which is the supreme judge of the universe. Their name for God in that document. And if they could do that and to give us the inheritance of this great nation, then how come we have these rhinos and these, just ridiculous people in Washington that they can't even survive a news cycle without breaking, and yet they come from this legacy of the founders who were willing to put their very lives on the line to do what's right. And I think that spirit is what a lot of this generation and the young patriots across the country, including yourself and hopefully including me as well, we have seen that we have to harness that same understanding and that moral truth and be willing to stand up firmly and saying our government system matters, protecting the rights of every individual in this country matters, understanding that all human beings are made in the image of God and have inherent dignity and worth and value, and be willing to be called the names. I mean, if that's the worst thing that we face is being called, bigots and racists, like, who cares? I mean, the founders would have loved to only have that much harassment in their day. And so we have to stand firmly and boldly and exercise the God-given freedoms that will continue to make this country great. And I think you're absolutely right that we have to get people who understand not only how America was founded, understand our founding documents, but are willing to stand firm in the moral truth and of the truth of who God is and why he created every human being and how we all have the rights that come directly from him, and that it's not government that gets to tell us how to live our lives. It's government that protects our right to pursue happiness. And so as you're looking forward to going into the U.S. Senate, and you mentioned that your primary is in May, which will be, I think, outcome determinative to your campaign. What is your focus for the Senate? And obviously, I don't think you'll be Mitch McConnell's stooge or anyone else's in the Senate. I loved what you said to me at CPAC. You don't carry anyone's water. You're going to stand firmly for the Constitution, for your own constituents. What are you looking forward to doing in the Senate that's really going to make an impact?
Well, I want to be a force multiplier. I want to be effective, asymmetrically effective, as we'd say in the infantry, beyond my vote. Still being in the Senate, you're still one of 100. So in my mind, as someone from a deep red state, a bold state that wants to send a real leader to D.C., I think the people of Arkansas will give me that mandate to go out beyond that one vote. I want to be able to be someone who can identify, recruit, fund, endorse other great candidates, not just at the federal level, but at the state level here in Arkansas and around the country. I'm proud to be endorsed, by a couple of congressmen who do that. People like yourself who go out and, they're not really constricted by, where they are on the map. They want to have a bold impact. They want to go out there and find that next generation of leaders who are going to save this country. And, I'm very blessed and very fortunate to have a good network here in Arkansas. And, as a former athlete and through my military career, I had a little bit of built-in name ID going in, but there's other great people who would be great political leaders, in the public sphere who don't have those those same benefits built in before they run. So I want to be someone who can be a champion for those people, not just for the values that I stand for in this race and this campaign, but I want to be someone who leads not just by my vote and by my example in the U.S. Senate, but someone who can actually rally others and bring others in my wake and can build just a cadre of great young bold leaders in the Senate and in Congress and in D.C., because that's what it's going to take. It's not just going to be sending one person on a white horse into the swamp to save things. It's got to be a movement, and we've got to keep pressing and keep moving the needle forward, because for so many years it's been a one-way ratchet. I'm sure you know that term in legal discourse, but it's really been that way in all of politics. I mean, the left they've taken over slowly and incrementally all the major institutions in American life, not just politics, not just the media, but unfortunately sports, these woke, crazy leftist sports leagues, the military. It pains me. One of the reasons why I'm motivated to get into politics is because I saw what was happening behind the scenes in our military, as I was transitioning, under the Trump administration into, having Joe Biden as commander in chief, and with these insane vaccine mandates, the woke leftist indoctrination in our military. We've already seen the just utter failures of the upper echelons of our senior command at the Pentagon, with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, with the Secretary of Defense. There's existential rot that has taken root in our military. And, if I'm blessed enough to win this race and, perhaps be on the Senate Armed Services Committee, I'll be able to have an impact there and to completely, change the way that our military is led, because it starts at the top. It starts with leadership. I want to be a leader on, military issues and also social issues, but really everything. It's not a single issue campaign. I've got to be someone who leads from the front on the issues that matter to Arkansans and conservatives and America First patriots all over this country.
Yeah, and speaking of coalition building, that was something that President Trump has done so well, and I think you're very wise to look at Congress and the U.S. Senate as a team sport. One of my favorite people in Washington, and probably the person that I trust the most in Washington, is Congressman Mike Johnson. He's been such a great friend. He's congressman from Louisiana. A lot of my listeners know who he is, and he's been on this show a number of times. And he always reminds me that Congress is a team sport. And so for all of these people who are up there just championing their one single issue or the one thing that they prefer, they're kind of missing the whole idea of a cadre that you were talking about, Jake, and how really the GOP has done a terrible job of building a genuinely conservative coalition. And, speaking of CPAC, that is my one major problem with a lot of these so-called conservative organizations that are doing what I like to call moral gerrymandering. Therefore, this whole idea of being a big tent, they're missing that there are some things that are non-negotiable. And leadership is making sure that you are proceeding on the basis of truth, of a moral framework that doesn't have concessions on things that aren't negotiable. And so when you have things like, the Log Cabin Republicans that are sponsoring CPAC, when you have the Pride Coalition in the GOP, when you have some of these things that are so completely antithetical to the moral values of what underpin and undergird conservatism, then you're truly destroying that coalition before it even has a chance of launching. And so one of the things that I think is incredibly important for people who are in Washington and for the next generation of conservatives is to remember those values and having those fundamental principles that don't give those types of concessions. And of course, it is all about compromise in some of those ways that you have to in negotiation. In contract litigation and in negotiation. As a lawyer, I know all about making the concessions that you need to get to a deal, but at the same time, you don't sacrifice the things that are essential. And we've seen over and over again the people in Washington who don't understand or who just simply aren't willing to stand up firmly for the principles of conservatism that ultimately are the principles of the Christian worldview as the best explanation of the reality to which we're presented. And so, what are your thoughts on some of that coalition building in terms of making sure to draw the bright line distinctions between what is genuine conservatism and Christian values versus just being, the next person in Washington and, the GOP that's the windsock and that's not really standing for anything?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We can't allow ourselves to be co-opted by the spirit of the age, as so many people call it. It's easy to get wrapped up into those narratives because we're just bombarded by it with the mainstream media. Things that were so far to the left, just outside of the political mainstream 20, 30 years ago, are now considered moderate or even center-right. The traditional biblical view of marriage is a great example. I remind people in Arkansas, and everyone, it's a line that makes everyone shake their heads, is that Barack Obama, this is the truth, he ran, he may not have believed it in his mind, but he ran as a traditional marriage presidential candidate in 2008. And that just goes to show you how far the needle has shifted. And I also think it illustrates the massive chasm that is between the establishment Republican Party and the base, the beating heart of the grassroots. And I don't think the answer is widening that chasm. I think it's shrinking it. I think it's leaning into our strongest supporters, the people who still believe in the traditional views that this country was founded upon. Okay, the people of Arkansas, I mean, we are still, as I like to say, barrel-chested, red-blooded American patriots, and those things haven't changed. And this is a state where people still go to church on Sunday mornings, and we still talk about these things around the dinner table. And I think we take this country back by leaning into those traditional values rather than trying to escape them and become co-opted by the spirit of the age. So I totally reject that logic. It's encouraging, and as we, there's no organization that is without its faults, but it is encouraging to see young people across this country who are, they might not, understand it. They might be feeling it more at a subconscious level, but they do feel empty in our contemporary discourse. They feel empty with all the things they see through the mainstream media, with all these corrupted institutions, and they're looking for something deeper. And obviously that starts with faith, but they're also looking towards traditional just things that our government was founded upon tradition, and that's what I like to define conservatism as embracing tradition, and I think we should lean into that and not shy away from it.
Yeah, and truth doesn't change. And so, whether the left and the progressives say that, we have to continue to create a different culture and lean into, as you call it, the spirit of the age. Well, while some culture and technology and other things, of course, do change into and continue to have to be navigated, truth does not change. And we've seen that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so when we as conservatives are grounded in truth and say, okay, our government is built on this recognition of divine truth, then the purpose and the goal of government doesn't change. And that's why these rights that are protected, when we look at what's happening to the First Amendment, when we're looking at what's happening to censorship, when we're looking at, what's happening, as you said, to traditional marriage and some of these things, well, even though the way that we apply the First Amendment is going to look very different in 2022 than it did, in 1787, the fundamental right is still the same, and it is still God-given. And so to have people like you who are wanting to go to Washington, understanding that and actually protecting those rights, I think is so incredibly important, not only for Washington, but also to teach the next generation, to say that, this isn't just about policy, this is about principle. And so as you're looking, Jake, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, given your military background, on the principles of what's going on in Washington right now, and especially as we're looking at the situation in Ukraine. And, to me, as someone who obviously is not, a military expert, I'm not the veteran that you are, and thank you so much for your service to this country. As we're looking at what's going on, it's actually deeply disturbing to me from just an economic standpoint. Some of these things that are coming out, for example, like MasterCard and Visa, that are just saying, we don't agree with what Russia's doing, so we're shutting down all of the citizens in Russia, their ability to use their credit card, to access their bank accounts. I mean, people can laud that and say, well, yeah, Russia is obviously the bad guys. But if you're looking at that precedent and what that would mean if, say, they disagree with what the 47th president of the United States is doing, that kind of thing is really, really disturbing, and not just on the ground in Ukraine of this, invasion of a sovereign nation, but how the world and specifically America is responding. There's some things that are concerning here. What's your take?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think it's important to note that, in the midst, as this crisis in Eastern Europe started to unfold, Joe Biden rolled out his new Supreme Court nomination. So, we have to just cut through the noise and look at what the Democrats are actually doing. They're focusing on their domestic policy agenda. That's where it always starts and always ends with them, is their domestic policy agenda. I mean, Barack Obama famously, he saw our military just truly as more of a social justice experiment, just one other avenue to advance his domestic policy agenda. And the Biden administration is no different. They introduced their new SCOTUS nominee in the midst of this crisis. I think they're using the energy crisis that's coinciding with it as an excuse to continue to expand their Green New Deal agenda here on our shores. And really, this crisis was precipitated, by Joe Biden's weakness in Afghanistan. I said this last summer that this was, the Afghanistan debacle, was about much more than the withdrawal from one nation in the Middle East. It was a signal to our enemies, who are always looking for an advantage, that we have a weak and feckless commander in chief. And I warned at the time that this was going to be an opportunity for the enemies of this country to mobilize. We're not just seeing it in Eastern Europe. We're seeing it in China. We're seeing it in Iran. We're seeing it in North Korea. And so the consequences, we're living them right now. But, I do say this, and I say it firmly, that I am not for, American military intervention in this conflict in Eastern Europe. I think that would be a mistake. There have been some incredibly irresponsible comments from not just members of the media, but members of the Republican Party, calling for the establishment of a no-fly zone. I don't think people really understand what that means. That means Americans shooting down Russian aircraft, which is insane. That would precipitate a nuclear exchange, possibly. People are talking about, talking about assassinating, foreign heads of state. That has not worked out well for the United States interests over the past several decades. It's really unfortunate to see, a lot of these lessons learned, what you hoped were lessons learned from the past 20 years with our interventions, particularly in nation building in Afghanistan and Iraq, which, for the latter, I saw firsthand was a failure. So we have a lot of work to do in communicating, cutting through the noise of the mainstream media, of the uniparty, unibrow government in D.C. It's unfortunate to see that after, the last 2 years of, whenever the political establishment and the media are marching in lockstep on a single issue, like it was with COVID and the vaccines and the mask mandates, you would hope that after 2 years, we were a bit more skeptical. We're seeing that now on Ukraine, and I don't think we're seeing enough healthy skepticism about when everyone is marching to the same drumbeat when it comes to DC in the media complex. So, I'm very much skeptical of American military intervention. I don't think it should happen. I'm hoping that there is a ceasefire in short order. I think that the defense of Ukraine, their fate was sealed with the lack of response after Russian incursions in Crimea in 2014. Obviously these countries, NATO and NATO-aligned countries in Europe, have been drafting off of the American taxpayer. They've been drafting off the protection of the American military. A lot of these countries, these Eastern Bloc countries, they don't really have a military of their own. Germany infamously spends less than 1.5% of their GDP on defense. They really don't have the means of defending themselves. And, look, this is not the end of history. There's really no excuse for a country that does not spend on their own military defense. They really shouldn't be that upset, when they get invaded. And, it's tough love, so to speak, but, we have to look out for American interests first. And I do not think that means boots on the ground or things like a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
Yeah, and that definition of no-fly zone, I think you're right that a lot of people really don't understand that and how that can precipitate really World War III. And, that's been kind of the rhetoric of, we're going to engage in World War III, but it's literally possible at this point in time. And it's so interesting to me as well how almost overnight, all of the, COVID narrative, Dr. Fauci's nowhere to be seen. All of these blue states like New York now that are getting rid of all of their mandates, this crumbled because of the Supreme Court decision and because the Biden administration was not able to push through their domestic agenda through the COVID narrative. Now, suddenly overnight, all the leftists, all the Twitter bots, they have their Ukraine flag in place of, their two little emoji vaccine syringes in their personal pronoun bios. They have the flags instead of their mask profile pictures. And it's almost like overnight, somebody sent out the talking points and everything changed. And so as we're looking at the potential for this great reset, I had been saying from a legal standpoint over and over for the last 2 years, they don't care about health and safety. They only care about the precedent, because if they can compel you to take a vaccine under the auspices of it's for your health and the greater good, what else can they not mandate under that same provision? So now when we're looking at the narrative, and you're right to focus, I think, on the domestic agenda that they are pushing through now, while everyone's attention is focused on Ukraine, and even through that whole just debacle that's over there. I've seen reports, and I think it makes a lot of sense about this coming so-called cybersecurity threat, and how this is going to advance what they've been trying to do, which is to take hold of world currency, make it, completely just one world government, and to say that this kind of breach into cybersecurity is going to require the U.S. intervention to say, okay, we have to, as the government, make sure that we are depressing the risk. And in doing so, they're going to actually create a lot of problems for Americans. And so where do you see all of this going with the greater picture than just what the news is talking about?
Well, I think you're right to focus on the dangers of a lot of these giant American corporations and international globalist corporations cutting off individuals from their banks. Cutting off. Obviously, we've seen unprecedented censorship from these giant tech companies for the past couple of years, and I think you're right. The precedent is being set is that if you have offensive political views, or if you are somehow going against the spirit of the age or the regime, then it is acceptable for you to be ostracized, essentially, just taken out of the public square, and removed from your ability to participate in the economy, even have your essential services or your personal liberty to be violated. And I think that's extremely dangerous. I don't hear enough people in the Republican Party talking about just as you said, the markers that are being laid down, first through COVID, and now through the Canadian protests, the reactions to that, these sanctions on just private Russian citizens, people of Russian descent here in the United States. It's disturbing to see that, and we need more people who are not only aware of this, but are prepared to fight back against the powers that be that are trying to enable this to happen. Because we all know when Democrats are in power, they want to expand the unaccountable administrative state. They want to expand these unaccountable administrative agencies that have true rulemaking and lawmaking authority de facto in the United States now. And I think it's a litmus test for anyone who wants to call themselves a leader in conservative politics. You have to be willing to go to war against the fourth branch of government, which is now the administrative state, because that's really how the Democrats over the years, they figured out that it's almost impossible to really pass their entire agenda through Congress. They're going to use it through these administrative agencies, and we've seen that from the IRS, the CDC, people like Dr. Fauci. No one votes for these
OSHA
people.
mandates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No one votes for these people, but they have true. I mean, if the last 2 years have demonstrated nothing, it's demonstrated their ability to reach out and touch every single American citizen, and that's extremely dangerous. And it's one of the reasons why I'm running, is to fight back and take that out from the inside out.
Yeah, and the agency authority of these unelected bureaucrats is astonishing, and it's really unconstitutional if you look at it from the federal level. And looking at how the Biden administration, I mean, during the Trump 2020 campaign, there was a reason that we called him Beijing Biden, and how Biden was taking a lot of his policy and a lot of his viewpoints from the Chinese Communist Party, and of course implementing a social credit score, and having talking about censorship, and having Americans who, if we are censored off of the public square, a lot of people just say, I don't really care about Twitter anyway. Well, it's not just about being censored off of a private big tech oligarch social media platform, it ultimately will result in not being able to participate in the economy. Like you said, not having, the closing and shuttering of businesses, but ultimately being a lot like the Chinese Communist Party. And that's what we're facing. And so while it's really easy for a lot of these, GOP establishment hacks to go for the low-hanging fruit and just talk about the conflict of Russia versus Ukraine, I think they're missing the bigger picture here of the World Economic Forum and how they're trying to push through all of the world economy, and how this is truly all about control. And that's ultimately what the Biden administration wants, is control. And they want to make sure that you and I can only do what they say we can do, when and where and how, which is completely antithetical to what our Constitution obligates them to do as an American government. So focusing on America first, I think, is absolutely the right focus, Jake. And, I think this is just yet another test for American government, but it's also the next test for true conservatives. And so 2022, kind of bringing this back to where we started, 2022 is the best defense this election of how we can make sure that our government is going to actually protect us, and Congress, if the conservative majority actually gets back the House and the Senate, to make sure to stop the Biden regime and their over-controlling, just overblown administrative state. So how can people help support you? I've been telling everyone, do not donate to the RNC. The RNC is ridiculous. The RNC is supporting all of their establishment picks. Donate to individual candidates and their campaigns directly. That is the best way that you can influence 2022. Obviously, besides getting out and vote, make sure that you are helping in your polling precinct. Wherever you live, whatever state you are in, make sure that you are supporting your state and local candidates. Donate directly to the candidates. And so, Jake, how can people donate directly to you and your campaign?
Well, it's my website, jakebequette.com, JakeBuette.com. And you're exactly right. People ask me all the time, they watch the news, they're angry, they're upset. They have their own, they have their personal lives, they have their families, they have their professions, and they can't really focus on politics in terms of action. So they want to know how to get involved. And of course, I'm biased, I'm running for office, but I always tell them you can identify and donate to great candidates, because that's where it starts. It starts in these primaries. In states like Arkansas, the primary is the race. Okay, so we're not going to lose to a Democrat statewide in Arkansas. So the real race, the real question is, hey, which Republican do I want advancing the America First, the conservative warrior agenda in D.C.? And I hope you go to JakeBequette.com and help me out. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Jake. And follow Jake also on Twitter, on Facebook, all across social media. You have some great videos and commentary that, I always retweet everything you send me and always appreciate you highlighting that. So everyone should follow you on social media. I think it's at JakeBequette91 on Twitter, if I'm not mistaken. And was that your jersey number?
Yes, that was my Arkansas Razorback jersey number, 91.
Okay, sounds good. And I have to ask you too. So was it the Patriots when you won the Super Bowl? Was that 2015?
2015. It was the Seahawks game, the Malcolm Butler interception there on the goal line. Yeah, that was a great one.
Okay, so that was actually so funny story. So my sister-in-law is actually from Boston, loves the Patriots. This was a huge family drama when it was Patriots versus Broncos, because we were she was literally the only one in the house that was for the Patriots. And that one 2015 game was the first time I was like, okay, fine, I will be a Patriots fan just for this time, and actually got all in the gear and was like, okay, fine. So that, not that that's why you guys won, but I'm just saying that probably.
No, that was it. You joined the winning team, Jenna, and that got us over the edge.
Yes,
so thank you.
You're welcome. And on behalf of my sister-in-law, she loves the Patriots, and so we'll be really excited that I got to talk to you. And, for that one game, I was actually going back through and I was like, wait a second. I think 2015 was the one time I was a Patriots fan. So there you go.
I love it. Yeah, go Pats.
All right, awesome. Well, Jake Bequette, thanks so much, and I wish you a lot of success on your campaign. Come back anytime and look forward to following your race.
Thanks, Jenna. God bless.
God bless. Vaccines have not eliminated the Chinese Fauci virus, so we all need extra protection for our immune systems. My friends at Centurion Labs have combined 5 key ingredients to defend your immune system against allergies, cold, the flu, and even the coronavirus. It's called Centurion Defender, and it incorporates vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, copper, and quercetin in just 1 capsule. No more swallowing 10 pills a day or not taking supplements because the individual cost is just too high. So take 1 Defender with breakfast and 1 with dinner, and keep living your life. Just like the Centurions of Rome led by example and held themselves to the highest possible standards, Centurion Labs has dedicated the last 15 years to research and develop safe, effective, and affordable healthcare products made in the USA that you can trust. For a limited time, listeners of this show can save 20% off their first order of Centurion Defender. Visit centurionlabs.com/Jenna and use the promo code JENNA. Defend your health today with Centurion Defender. That's centurionlabs.com/Jenna and the promo code Jenna. Centurion Labs, that's with an S, centurionlabs.com/JENNA.